Good evening. I'm Ronald Paul, President of the JCRC of Greater Washington. Welcome to our annual 2021 meeting. Before I begin, we must acknowledge the current situation in the Middle East. Hamas and other terrorist groups in Gaza have indiscriminately fired thousands of rockets at Israel in recent days, killing and injuring many innocent civilians. Israel, like all sovereign nations, has the right and responsibility to defend its people against terrorism and any other security threats. We stand in solidarity with the Jewish state, express our sorrow at the loss of all innocent lives, both Israeli and Palestinian, and pray for an end to the violence. Now let's begin. A special welcome to the new members of the JCRC Board of Directors, and congratulations to our honorees this evening. In a year filled with challenges and opportunities, I am so proud of how our terrific staff and talented board, by working together tirelessly and passionately to fulfill Jewish values, have successfully taken action to benefit our neighbors, the Jewish community, and the state of Israel. Please accept my gratitude. I also want to thank so many of you for your devotion to JCRC, community members, leaders, partners, and donors. Your ongoing support of our organization has been pivotal to our success. Even with the challenges of this Zoom-filled year, the JCRC was successful in fulfilling our mission. Let me share a few highlights with you. As my predecessor, Sam Kaplan, said, the JCRC is the little engine that could. Our Israel Action Center reached more than 1,800 community members since last May through numerous Israel-related webinars. The topics of these webinars range from the U.S. elections to Israel, from the U.S. elections to Israel's success in the COVID vaccine rollout to situational updates. We continued building our Margot and Yoram Cohen Israel Engagement Fellowship Program. It's called the IEF program. This program is designed to prepare high school students for Israel engagement and advocacy on their future college campuses. Nearly 130 students from around the country participated in the program online, including 43 who made our first ever summer cohort. Our student-to-student program trained 78 students as peer educators in the fall of 2020. They presented on what it means to be a Jewish teen more than 40 times in both public and independent schools in Virginia, Maryland, and DC. They also conducted 4 interfaith dialogues with Hindu, Mormon, Catholic, and Presbyterian teens. These IEF and student-to-student graduates will be future leaders of our Jewish community. The JCRC continued to expand our Holocaust remembrance work online with our second virtual Yom HaShoah community-wide commemorations. Nearly 850 households joined us live, and another 13,000 watched the recording as keynote speaker Elisha Wiesel discussed gratitude, which he said was a defining characteristic of his late father, Eli Wiesel. Throughout this challenging year, we called for positive change in the halls of Virginia and Maryland's General Assemblies and at the DC Council. JCRC's legislative accomplishments this year are very impressive. Even with the pandemic, the JCRC successfully advocated to expand funding opportunities to provide security and services at Jewish institutions. In Maryland, we secured $5 million to fund grant programs to provide security for synagogues, religious schools, day schools, and childcare centers. In addition, we secured state dollars to support services for seniors and Holocaust survivors, as well as advocating for the protection of older adults who have been victims of elder abuse and expanding the economic cooperation between Israel and Maryland. I'm very proud of the efforts of our Domestic Affairs Commission that resulted in a comprehensive policy on police reform. This enabled our agency to support legislation in Maryland that brings historic police reform to hold officers accountable, establish greater transparency about misconduct, and limit the use of force and no-knock warrants. Also, it looks like the Montgomery County Council will soon establish a $700,000 security grant program that will provide both capital and operating funds to faith-based institutions, a program conceived by JCRC. In Virginia, we had a truly breakthrough year. We secured an additional $50,000 for the Jewish Social Services Agency to assist low-income Holocaust survivors, funding for the Jewish Foundation for Group Homes to help young adults as they age out of educational entitlements, and establish a new program to provide over $1.5 million for security at faith-based institutions. We also advocated for Virginia to become the 21st state and the first Southern state to abolish the death penalty. JCRC advocated to deem testing, treatment, and vaccination to be emergency services to be provided by the state to vulnerable populations regardless of immigration status. Finally, in DC, we championed the REACH Act, which establishes equity protocols in the district government's operation toward combating institutional racism. And we supported legislation that ensures meaningful access to maternal health care for typically underserved women. The JCRC developed Listen, Learn, and Act, a toolkit of anti-racism resources, which we shared with clergy and leadership throughout Greater Washington and JCRCs around the country. JCRC staff was a familiar face at congregation and groups throughout the DMV, focusing on the Jewish community's role in racial justice and equity. Before I go any further, I want to thank my friend and our very talented executive director, Ron Halber, for his steadfast leadership, especially under the unusual circumstances this past year. Even during a pandemic, working with Ron is a joy. I am proud of the resolve, steadfastness, and care that drove the JCRC's work this year under extraordinary circumstances. There's more work to be done. I'm confident the JCRC will meet any challenge that our community faces. It is an honor to serve as the president of this fabulous organization, and I thank you for the opportunity. I am sure the best is yet to come.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gil Preuss, the CEO of the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington. It is my pleasure to bring greetings from the Federation to the JCRC annual meeting. For many decades, Federation and JCRC have partnered to strengthen this community in so many ways. JCRC has been a critical partner to building a stronger Jewish community, to making sure that resources are available throughout the region as we seek to serve those most vulnerable, and to build a safer and more connected region. And for that, I'd like to say thank you. We continue to work incredibly closely as we identify challenges that we face today and look forward to understanding and addressing the challenges of tomorrow. Time and time again, JCRC has proved its leadership and has shown the path as we seek to build a stronger, healthier, more connected, and safer Jewish community. So thank you very much for everything that you do. Thank you to the JCRC leadership. Thank you to the JCRC staff. And thank you to Ron for your leadership and partnership for everything that you have done as we seek to build a stronger, more connected, more secure Jewish community.
Good evening. I am Sam Kaplan, the immediate past president of the JCRC and chair of the nominating committee. At this time, we will begin the business part of tonight's meeting. As immediate past president, I had the pleasure of chairing this year's nominating committee. The committee members carefully reviewed an outstanding group of applicants, and tonight I will present our recommended slate for your approval. First, I would like to thank the members of the nominating committee for their time and commitment and for serving on this important body charged with recommending those who should sit on the JCRC Board of Directors. They are Annette Forsetter, Galia Masika Greenberg, Peter Haas, Fran Kritz, Ed Rayfield, Alan Schulman, Cantor Michael Shockett, and Tal Wittis. Following the reading of the proposed slate, voting members of the board and delegate assembly in attendance will be asked to cast their votes in an online poll. The nominating committee proposes that the following current community representatives serving on the JCRC board be elected for an additional 2-year term. They are Judith Fogel, Fran Kritz, Daphne Lazar-Price, Christopher McCannell, Barry Perlis, Alan Schulman, Bobby Schulman, June Schrone, Ezra Weinblatt, and Marilyn Wind. The nominating committee proposes the following new community representatives to the board for the 2021 to 2023 term: Marion Goldberg, Susan Jurison, Johnny Schukart. The nominating committee also proposes the following ongoing organizational representatives for an additional 2-year term: Rabbi Hazan Rachel Ann Hirsch from the Washington Board of Rabbis, Rabbi Gary Pokras, Reform Movement, David Weiss, American Jewish Committee, Sarah Donna Lefkowitz, Hadassah. Is there a motion to accept the slate of the new appointees and renominated members to the JCRC Board of Directors as presented by the nominating committee? I recognize Michael Friedman. Is there a second? I recognize Stephanie Sanders Levy. An online poll will now be launched for the members of the Delegate Assembly and the JCRC Board of Directors to cast their vote. Okay. The motion passes. Mazel tov to all new, current, and returning board members. I want to also acknowledge outgoing board member Connie Liss and Carly Pildes for their outstanding service to our JCRC board. In addition, I want to thank our president, executive committee, and all of our board members for their ongoing dedication and passionate support of JCRC and our mission. A special thank you to our continuing executive committee and board members for your time and commitment to the JCRC. Lastly, JCRC President Ron Paul is able to appoint 3 members to the board to serve concurrently with his term. He has proposed Jerry Weiss to join the board. Jerry serves as Executive Vice President, Chief Administrative Officer, and Interim General Counsel at Freddie Mac, which makes home ownership and rental housing more affordable and accessible. Jerry has more than 30 years' experience in the financial services industry. He graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Binghamton University with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and earned a law degree from the George Washington University. In addition to his professional endeavors, Jerry has previously served on the boards of Northern Virginia Family Services and the Hebrew Home of Greater Washington. Jerry and his wife of 33 years, Carol Lee Berlinski Weiss, live in Washington, D.C. Their more recent community and philanthropic activities have been in support of autism research and neurodiversity and inclusion. Is there a motion to accept the presidential appointment of Jerry Weiss to the JCRC Board of Directors? I recognize Bobby Schulman. Is there a second? I recognize Bob Budoff. An online poll will now be launched for members of the JCRC Board of Directors to cast their vote. We doing okay? The motion passes. Mazel tov, Jerry. Welcome to the JCRC. And thank you, everyone, for being here this evening.
Good evening. My name is Julie Greenwald, and I'm the Executive Assistant and a Senior Program Associate at the JCRC of Greater Washington. Gary Rosenthal has been sculpting in welded materials since the early 1970s. He is self-taught, and his inspiration to create Judaica came from being asked one day if he could create a mezuzah, to which he responded, "Why not?" And the rest is history. Gary's artistic mission then became to create contemporary Judaica that would be beautiful enough to leave out on display, even when it is not being used. For Gary, art is a way to empower people. He has been recognized as an outstanding employer in the Washington area for hiring numerous emigres from the former Soviet Union when jobs were hard to find, as well as adults with differing abilities, all of whom are important parts of the team. Together, they create one of the most popular and unique lines of Judaica by combining copper, brass, and steel with brilliant fused glass, all in contemporary style rooted in tradition. Gary believes that art can be a catalyst to building community, and that it is a mitzvah to create art, functional, beautiful art. Gary and his team have also taken on such mitzvahs as making dreidels to send to Jewish families after Hurricane Katrina, and Shabbat candlesticks to send to Jewish families after the Northern California wildfires. Gary recently retired from the wholesale Judaica business as he relaunches his glass ribbon project, designed to do good and promote healing in the face of adversity. Fused glass pieces, known as strength stones or chemo buddies, are created free of charge to share with loved ones going through medical treatment as a physical and symbolic connection of support, love, and healing. This project has taken on a personal meaning for Gary as he continues to battle pancreatic cancer. Proceeds from the Glass Ribbon Project have gone to support those touched by breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, and pediatric conditions. Works from the Gary Rosenthal collection have been presented to many, including United States presidents and elected officials, celebrities, and others. It has been seen worldwide in many fine galleries, private collections, and museum shops throughout the country. It is my honor and privilege to be a friend of Gary's and to honor him tonight as a builder of community, both locally and around the globe. And Gary, please know that the JCRC of Greater Washington will be making a donation to the Glass Ribbon Project in your honor.
Oh, well, Julie, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I wanted to thank JCRC for this honor, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you this evening. And I really wanted to say how lucky I feel that I'm able to be a sculptor. I wake up every day and I go out and I make beautiful things that people are going to use within their homes to celebrate their Judaism. I started 40 years ago trying to use my art to do good. We created a foundation called Art as a Catalyst. We worked with women at Rachel's Women's Center to create Christmas tree ornaments. We worked with children to teach them how to put on magic shows in seniors' facilities, all funded by the sale of, Gary Rosenthal sculpture over the years, because I always saw that my sculpture was a means to an end. I would try and make things that were beautiful that people could put into their home, but at the same time, I was hoping that it would bring about more. It will bring about good. And we have used the things that we make, both within the Jewish community and without, to support those in need, to make the world a better place. Tikkun Olam has been part of what we've done, and it's what our life is. We try and be a social venture. We try and do good while we do business, and you can see from the results we've been fairly successful. And thank you very much again for such an honor.
Mazel tov.
Thank you.
My name is Marcy Schwab. I am a member of the JCRC board and a co-chair of the JCRC's Education Commission. I am pleased to introduce 4 public officials who this year demonstrated courageous leadership on behalf of Jewish children and their families in Fairfax County. Laura Jane Cohen, Karl Frisch, Rachna Sizemore Heizner, and Melanie Meren withstood tremendous pressure in voting against the adoption of a school calendar that once again does not include closures on 4 days coinciding with the most widely observed Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, and Jain holidays. The board's majority vote to perpetuate an inherently inequitable status quo came after an 18-month process in which our minority faith communities had invested significant time, energy, and trust. It left our families feeling betrayed, unheard, and unseen. Throughout the difficult campaign leading up to the vote, these 4 board members only deepened in their commitment to pursue religious equity. They actively and compassionately listened to our students and our parents, validating our pain and our anger. They stood up for what they believed to be right. Those of us at the JCRC who worked on the campaign know that it was not an easy task for these leaders to stick to their principles in the face of considerable pressure to go along to get along, especially in the midst of an academic year in which we had tremendous upheaval due to COVID. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, one of the greatest Jewish scholars and leaders of the last century, said, "Leaders lead because there is work to do. There are people in need. There is injustice to be fought. There is wrong to be righted. There are problems to be solved and challenges ahead. They lead because they know to stand idly by and expect others to do the work is the too easy option. The responsible life is the best life there is and is worth all the pain and frustration. There is much work ahead to do to ensure that all Fairfax County Public School students of all identities and abilities have an equitable opportunity to flourish and succeed. Rest assured that we at the JCRC are committed to continuing to partner with all of you and hopefully many of your colleagues on the school board in this critical work. With your leadership and allyship, we will win this fight, and we thank you from the deepest part of our hearts.
In Fairfax County tonight, some faith leaders urging school leaders for a new calendar. The religious minorities want more days off for their holidays.
It's honestly been really hard for me every single year when the holiday rolls around.
Danan El Sayed says balancing life as a Muslim and a student can be difficult. Last year, the Fairfax County School Board created a task force which proposed 2 options that would close schools on 4 Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, and Sikh observances. Since the vote was postponed by the pandemic, a third option was added by a working group, which did not add as many holidays off, a decision which blindsided task force members.
To put in all of that hard work over 18 months and then feel that it's being completely disregarded, and more importantly, to feel that our voices are not being heard is incredibly discouraging.
Good evening. I will not be supporting this motion to support the proposed calendar.
While I know it is likely to be approved tonight, I will not be supporting Calendar D.
Calendar D is othering. We are asking those of minority faiths to choose to other themselves, to separate themselves from the majority, to segregate themselves by missing school while everyone else continues together to learn, engage, and as Nathan said, hang out and be part of the community.
I will not vote for this calendar tonight. I won't vote for it because the Springfield District agrees that we should find a way to include these holidays. And I won't vote for it because my kids, all our kids, deserve to know that they matter for all the things that make them uniquely them. and that adults should never ask them to make the choices that we ask them to make, because it is our job to teach them to never swallow who they are.
The calendar process should bring people together. It has done the opposite these past few weeks. The board can chart a different path in the future, if only it seizes the opportunity.
There is a trauma that comes from being othered. I know. I have lived it since I was 5 years old.
And so I do have hope that something better will come, that we can be creative, and I hope that that we will just continue working for something that we know that our students deserve. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sam.
I'm Noah.
I'm Layton.
Thank you for voting for a calendar that supports religious minorities.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Jane Cohen, and I'm the Springfield District Representative on the Fairfax County School Board.
I am Rachna Sizemore Heizner, and I'm an at-large member on the Fairfax County School Board.
I am Melanie Meren, and I represent the Hunter Mill District on the Fairfax County School Board.
I'm Karl Frisch, and I am the Providence District Representative on the Fairfax County School Board.
We want to thank you for your advocacy during our recent deliberations on the 2021-2022 school year calendar. Hundreds of students, staff, and families shared their powerful personal stories. For that, we are incredibly grateful.
No child should be meant to feel othered or less than. But for too many, that is exactly what happens when we force them to choose between attending school and honoring religious or cultural traditions.
Now in FCPS, the Chief Academic Officer, Chief Equity Officer, Chief Operations Officer, and Chief Counsel are leading work to establish a new calendar development process that clarifies criteria and priorities, including recognition for religious and cultural observances.
So this conversation is not over. We look forward to working with our colleagues and the community to make the school calendar more equitable for our students, staff, and their families. And your continued advocacy will be an important part of that effort.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Thorne Posen, and I'm Vice President of the JCRC. I am pleased to introduce two local Jewish institutions, Kemp Mill Synagogue and the Jewish Neighbors Association, that have gone above and beyond in addressing the severe food insecurity crisis in Montgomery County, triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. And as a result of their Herculean efforts, we recognize them today. The greater Washington, D.C. Jewish community can justifiably take pride in its extensive efforts to assist vulnerable populations in our midst over the last 14 months. As the economy shut down, schools closed, and COVID infection rates soared, Montgomery County faced crisis-level rates of food insecurity, homelessness, and sudden insolvency. Among the many Jewish institutions that stepped up their community outreach and service efforts, Kemp Mill Synagogue and the Jewish Neighbors Association have made a special mark, galvanizing hundreds of Jews across the county to feed those in need. To truly understand the depth of food insecurity crisis in Montgomery County, one need look no further than the weekly food pantry at Silver Spring Reformed Church, located just down the road from Kemp Mill Synagogue. Since the outset of the pandemic, the number of families accessing food assistance at SSRC has exploded. As KMS members saw the car lines at SSRC get longer and longer, they stepped up to provide weekly food supplies, including fresh produce and milk, to the food pantry, and also much needed logistical support. It is truly a community effort organized on a week-to-week basis through social media and word of mouth, with people from KMS and well beyond donating money to purchase and deliver the produce and other food items. Simultaneously, a group of KMS members who, during the first COVID surge, had organized an impromptu fundraiser for their neighborhood hospital, Holy Cross, and had provided meals to medical staff there, were approached by hospital administrators for assistance of a different order. Alarmed by data indicating that between 70 and 100 Holy Cross employees and their families were experiencing meaningful food insecurity, they asked KMS if it would be willing to stand up an ad hoc monthly food pantry. Out of that request, was born the Jewish Neighbors Association, which has organized Jews throughout Silver Spring and beyond to both supply this new Holy Cross food pantry and to provide meals to hospital staff. We take special pride in noting that JNA was the brainchild of two KMS leaders who also happen to be members of the JCRC board, Fran Kritz and Daphne Laser-Price. As a result of their tireless efforts, JNA, in partnership with the JCRC, mobilized numerous synagogues throughout Montgomery County from all denominations to each take on responsibility for underwriting and supporting 1 month of food pantry provision. Shelf staples, produce, milk, diapers, Christmas cookies, and more all were collected and purchased by synagogues and Jewish individuals. The logistics of organizing each month's food pantry were daunting, but without fanfare, JNA's activists rolled up their sleeves and got the job done. So it is with great pleasure that we honor KMS and JNA for their tremendous efforts and for their outstanding leadership at a time of profound need and suffering.
Fran and I are honored by this recognition of the Jewish Neighbor Association by the JCRC. This past fall, Holy Cross Hospital reached out to Fran because they expressed a need, which they discovered after conducting a survey for their staff, that many of their staff people were experiencing food insecurity as a direct result of the pandemic. When they reached out to us, we put together Fran reached out to me. We put together the Jewish Neighbor Association, where we reached out to congregations across the county to collect funds and shelf-stable goods to provide a monthly food delivery to staff at Holy Cross Hospital.
We're grateful to the Kemp Synagogue for leading us off with the very first contribution. And we're grateful to the JCRC for brainstorming with us, connecting us with synagogues across the religious spectrum, and for publicizing the efforts of the Jewish Neighbor Association. We now will be transitioning the members at Holy Cross to other sources of food security, and we remain ready to help the Jewish community for whatever it needs.
Hi, I'm Bram Weinberg, and I'm the rabbi of the Kemp Synagogue. On behalf of myself, my entire congregation, and my president, Larry Lerman, we would like to thank the JCRC so much for recognizing us at this important moment and for recognizing the small part that we've been trying to play in battling food insecurity in our area. Our efforts in this regard really arose because of a number of different things. We had a long-standing relationship with the Silver Spring Christian Reformed Church and with Pastor Doug Bratt. We've long known about their efforts with the food pantry over the course of the last many years. Over the time of this pandemic, as our congregants saw the line of cars growing and growing each and every week towards the food pantry, they became deeply concerned. And when they wanted to reach out and wanted to help and wanted to know what was going on, we knew exactly who to turn to because of that relationship that we had with them. And members of our own congregation and members of the church congregation have been able to work together in such great partnership and such great unity to be able to take very, very small steps to do all that we can to try to help the people in need. We sincerely pray and hope that all those in need, all those facing challenges, will see the blessings that they so deserve and will see some relief from the struggles that they face. We take this opportunity to thank the JCRC so much for the incredible work that you do in our community each and every day. We appreciate your efforts, we applaud your efforts, and we wish you much hatzlacha, much good luck going into the future. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I am Mark Kahn, JCRC board member and co-chair of the DC Commission. It's a special honor to introduce a very special person, our keynote speaker, Rabbi Lauren Tuckman. Ordained by the Jewish Theological Seminary in 2018, she has taught at numerous synagogues and other Jewish venues throughout North America and was named to the Jewish Week's 36 Under 36 for her innovative leadership concerning inclusion of Jews with disabilities in all aspects of Jewish life. If I may offer a personal word, one of the glories of Shabbat in DC is to witness Rabbi Tuchman's arrival to the morning services at Adas Israel Traditional Egalitarian Minyan. She finds her way to the front row, gets organized with her Braille Sidur and Chumash, and lights up the proceeding with her special presence. When we are really lucky, Rabbi Tuckman will daven Shacharit. Listening to her beautiful voice, we know our prayers have a special path to Shamayim. In 2017, Rabbi Tuckman delivered an Eli talk entitled, "We All Were at Sinai, the Transformative Power of Inclusive Torah." She has trained and continues to teach with Rabbi David Jaffe and the Inside Out Wisdom in Action Project, which provides a space for Jewish spiritual and contemplative practice for social justice activists. She is a participant of the Institute for Jewish Spirituality's Clergy Leadership Program. She serves on the board of Join for Justice, which trains Jews in community organizing for social change. In 2020, she was honored by JOFA, the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance. Interviewing Rabbi Tuckman is JCRC's Director of Intergroup Relations and Rabbi in Residence, Rabbi Abbay Sharovsky. Rabbi Sharovsky was ordained also at the JTS, where she currently earned a master's degree from the David School of Jewish Education. She was the Deputy Director of the Jewish Welfare Board Jewish Chaplains Council, working with Jewish military personnel and veterans. Rabbi Sharovsky is the recipient of several awards and fellowships for her work in the Jewish community. She currently serves on the Executive Council of the Rabbinical Assembly, as well as several interfaith boards and committees throughout Greater Washington. Please join me in welcoming these very special rabbis.
Hi, I'm here with Rabbi Lauren Tuckman. Rabbi Tuckman, it is great to be in conversation with you today. And I'd like to just get started with some basics. Where are you from? What drew you to the rabbinate? And what is your current rabbinate? How do you rabbi?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be with you today in conversation. And I am local to the DC area. I actually grew up in Bethesda, and my family is local as well. So I have spent a lot of my life in the DC area. I would say that my rabbinate at this point, what drew me to the rabbinate really was service and wanting to teach Torah. And really wanting to bring that wisdom to as many people as I can through the classes that I teach, through the pastoral care that I do, through the work I do with individuals in congregations, particularly in the area of disability inclusion. So I often say that I wear a variety of different rabbinic kippot, I guess you could put it one way, where I do a lot of teaching. So I teach at different places, including the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. And there's another organization that I teach with called the Inside Out Wisdom in Action Project, which is an organization that teaches Musar, which is Jewish character development, moral development, wisdom for living. And so I do a lot of that. I'm really interested in contemplative and spiritual practice. And I also do a lot of work in the area of building inclusive communities, specifically focused on disability, but not only focused on disability. So I think I feel that I'm feeling very privileged and lucky that my rabbinate is multifaceted at this point, and that there is Rabbi Tuckman, the educator, who teaches a lot of rabbinic texts and spiritual texts. And then there's the other piece of my rabbinate, which is teaching a lot of those same texts about disability, but then also bringing it out of the text and really into how people build the community and live their Jewish lives.
So what is an inclusive community in 2021, and how do we get there?
Yeah, so an inclusive community, I feel, is a community that's really based on relationship. And when we are in relationship with other people who are like us and not like us, then we're able to really build a rich community and a diverse community. And I know that that feels really abstract and sounds really abstract, so I'm going to try to put that in more concrete terms. I think about a Jewish community being inclusive as a Jewish community that welcomes a lot of different experience of Judaism, whether that is around religious practice. Of course, we have our own synagogues and other spaces that may be more affiliated with a particular denomination or stream of Judaism. But in terms of thinking about a broader community, a community that welcomes in lots of different ways of practicing, a community that welcomes in lots of different ways of connecting in general to Judaism, whether that's in a synagogue setting, whether that's going to a seminar, whether that's being in nature, whether that's Jewish music, whether that's film or literature, any of those things, or culture. And it's also really about, I think, allowing folks to feel like they can be their full self in the community. And so what I mean by that in a very direct way is that I am the first blind woman to be ordained a rabbi in the world. And I am also, of course, very passionate about building a Jewish community that is inclusive of people with disabilities. And I'm not going to put my Judaism to the side to do that, right? I am just as much a part of the Jewish community as I am a part of the blind community, as I am a part of other communities. And so those things just coexist. And I want to be able to show up in communities without feeling like I have to pick one or the other. And I think that in the world at large, we've got a ways to go. I think that it's not always easy for humans to think about all the different identities that we carry with ourselves. But I also really want us to be able to feel like we can be in a community as ourselves without necessarily feeling like, I'm representing the blind community, or I'm representing, whatever other community, but really like this is a part of who I am, just as my Judaism is integral to who I am. And that's just what makes me the Jew that I am.
Wow. So powerful, and really touches so many pieces of how we think about who we are. And it also makes me think about this past year. And as we're talking about building inclusive communities, how has the disruption of the pandemic created opportunities for an inclusive community? But also, how has it slowed progress?
Yes, such an important question, and one that I think that we will be dissecting and unpacking for a long time to come. So to talking about how we get there in terms of building inclusive community, I think really dovetails with the ways in which the pandemic created opportunity. And one of the ways that that is very apparent, in my experience, is that as things shifted from being in person to being online, and as the Jewish community pivoted overnight, and I remember naively thinking in March of 2020 that this would last us until Shavuot of last year, and then we would be back in person. Little did any of us have any idea. But at that time, as we pivoted so quickly, what it allowed for is an opportunity for people to access Jewish content in ways that they may not have ever been able to before. One of the ways that showed up for me in my own teaching is that I started to be able to teach people that I may not have reached in person, whether it was because they had a disability and didn't necessarily want to be traveling or had a harder time traveling, especially in the evening. That is certainly something I've been thinking a lot about in terms of how to bring my content to a more diverse audience, but also thinking about what happens if you just can't get out of your home for whatever reason, if you have any number of situations that just made getting to synagogue really hard. If you're someone who would use technology on Shabbat, the plethora of options for accessing services on a Shabbat morning or a Shabbat or a Friday night really was just incredible. I mean, you can't even count how much went online. And that, I think, allowed people who otherwise may not have been able to physically get to the building in person to be able to have a spiritual experience that was authentic and really connective. I think we also see this in terms of just the ways in which Jewish programming, not only synagogue-based, but everything we can imagine went online, and that really just opened the door. It made barrier to entry a lot lower. All you needed was a computer and an internet connection. Now, of course, we are very well aware that the digital divide exists still, and that online content is not going to suffice for everyone. Not everyone's able to get onto the internet. Not everyone is able to access things for whatever reason. So I think that is the piece where the progress has not moved. Because in the beginning, and I was very much part of this, right? I often would say, what a beautiful thing. This pandemic is awful. And what is the one silver lining, if we can even call it that, God forbid? Things are more accessible, except that that's true only partially. So how do we make sure that progress isn't stifled? And this is, again, part of the larger question of what is an inclusive community and how do we get there? It's really getting to know people and what they need. And I feel really strongly about building the relationships with the people that we know, asking them how they are, really reaching out if we can. Lots of different communities in our larger Washington area Jewish community are doing that, which is fantastic. But I think that's how we build that community, is one relationship at a time. We all can be part of that in our own little network, making sure people we know are doing okay. What do people need Jewishly? Were they connected for Passover? Did they have a Seder to go to? I know that was a conversation that we had around then. And just each is doing our part to really weave that web and let people know that people really care for them, especially during this time of pandemic when so much is consuming all of us and we don't have the bandwidth that we may once have had if we ever even had that bandwidth, right? Because so many of us have so many different life experiences. It can feel really hard to then say, oh, let me take the time now to reach out. I have all these other things going on. But I think also doing that little bit every single day, or every single time we can, just saying a shalom, a hello, how are you, really moves things, really does help us get there. It's not only about the accommodations that we put in for people with disabilities. That's my area of expertise. It's not only the accommodations we put in there, it's also just how we show up in the world.
So in a recent conversation with the Forward's Mira Fox, you talk about the weight of being the first female blind rabbi and that you don't want to be the last. What does the Jewish community need to do to make this happen for people with disabilities and for others with marginalized identities who are wary of being the first or even wondering if they should be the second?
Yeah, I think that's extraordinarily, very, very important and very fair question. Yeah, as I said in that piece, right, going into the rabbinate, I'd spent some time at JTS prior to going to rabbinical school. I had a sense of the institution. I had some relationships there. But it's one thing to have that, and it's another thing to realize the weight of what you're taking on. So I think that there are a couple of things that the Jewish community, that we all can do, and I consider myself to be part of the we here as well. Really investing, deeply, deeply investing in Jewish communal leadership and helping people become the leaders they want to be in the community. Really taking the time to invest in Jewish education as a benchmark and a foundation for what it means to live an active Jewish life. And just encouraging people, really, if you notice a talent or someone's really passionate and you think that they might make a really great leader, especially if they have a marginalized identity, to really encourage them and to help them realize that the Jewish community is multifaceted. I am sure that we have all read those stories and those op-eds and those articles about the ways in which people have felt othered and marginalized and really failed by the Jewish community. And so what we can do, I think, in response to that is just deeply encourage and show with our actions that we mean what we say. When we profess to really want to be in a Jewish community that is diverse and multivocal, that we live that out, that we embrace lots of ways of entry, because I think we are dealing with a crisis of belonging right now. And one of the ways to work through that. And with that is exactly to the point of how do we make sure that I am not the last blind female rabbi, is helping people feel deeply connected, that this Torah is yours as much as it is mine, as much as it is all of ours, that we are part of a collective, we are a part of a proud, long 4,000-year history that our nation has had, and what an honor and privilege to be part of this community and part of this people, and that that privilege extends to all of us. And we show that through, through teaching Torah from a diverse perspectives, giving people the opportunity to teach their Torah, giving people the opportunity to be part of the community in a lot of different ways. I often will say to people that I am as passionate about creating wonderful and rich prayer spaces as I am about creating wonderful and rich disability inclusive spaces. So it's really about nurturing talent and be grateful and excited about nurturing that talent and helping people actualize the best of who they are. And I will say that for me, amidst the very real challenges of rabbinical school, which anyone who's been to rabbinical school can attest to, there were always people who really were invested in me. I have mentors that I'm still in contact with from JCRC that truly were deeply invested in me as a rabbi and as someone developing as a Jewish leader. And that's what we need a lot more of.
Yes, 100 times yes. And I remember those days at JTS, and they were hard no matter who you were. And yes, I also very fondly remember you as a grad student, and watching you across the seminary synagogue and thinking, this is a person who's going to bring great Torah into the world. So I am so honored that we could spend this time together and that you could share your Torah with us today. And I'm very cognizant of the Torah portion for this week, Parshat Naso, and how it breaks down these different parts of society, these different classes and people who take on different vows and obligations, and people who may have sort of slipped along the way and done something that's not, that's not the best. People who have been injured. And you get to the end of that section and where all of these different people are described, and there's one blessing that's offered. And I'm struck by that is there really just one blessing that can encompass us all? Is that inclusion? I'm not sure, but I truly love the priestly blessing, the Yivarechacha, the idea that God's presence is among us, and that this blessing of God sort of shining upon us as we go through the world. And I offer that blessing to you, and I thank you so much for the Torah that you're bringing out into this world. We are all stronger for it.
Yeah, thank you so much for this incredible opportunity to be with you and to be with all of you. And I just want to say about that priestly blessing, it's my favorite piece of liturgy. And there is something so beautiful when we recite it in all the different ways that we recite it, when we read it in this week's Parsha, when we recite it in the context of prayer, in the context of blessing our children, or blessing our community, just this beautiful sense that God's presence is always here and with us, and that shows up in all of us as one right? As one people in all of our plurality and diversity, and that's what makes us such a rich and treasured people. So thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be with you and to be with all of you today.
Good evening. My name is Ron Halber, and it is my honor and privilege to serve as JCRC's Executive Director. Before I continue, I would like to congratulate our veteran board members on their re-election and enthusiastically welcome the new members of the JCRC board. We look forward to discovering ways to utilize your energy and passion and skills and find meaningful opportunities for your engagement. And congratulations to our honorees this evening and for showing us how to lead by example. And thank you to Rabbi Tuckman for your fascinating presentation. To say this year has been challenging is an enormous understatement. Who could have ever predicted a worldwide pandemic that in our own country would claim nearly 600,000 lives? Who could have predicted that we would one random day in March 2020, close our offices and enter this new virtual reality? Yet somehow, even under these extraordinary circumstances, the JCRC did what it has always done. Despite every obstacle placed in our way, we produced a year of extraordinary accomplishments that would stand out in any year. The JCRC's ability to adapt to our new circumstances so quickly and flawlessly while continuing to produce the critical results our community needs is truly admirable. This only highlights the need for our JCRC to grow and to be able to meet future community expectations and to fulfill our mission. Our president, Ron Paul, provided you with a brief overview of these successes. Please note that this took place when the Jewish community and our institutions relied more heavily on JCRC than ever before. Rather than reflect on this past year in greater detail, I want to emphasize the same theme as this year's Yom HaShoah speaker, Elisha Wiesel, son of Eli Wiesel, that is, gratitude. I want to thank our president, Dr. Ron Paul, for his calm, steadfast, passionate, and strategic leadership. It has been a blessing and truly wonderful experience to work with you every day. We are lucky to have someone of Ron's caliber to lead us this coming year. Thank you to the JCRC's Executive Committee and our board members for providing us with your leadership, wisdom, and efforts. It has been an absolute pleasure working with you and learning from you. I want to thank our synagogue and Jewish institution partners, community activists, and donors for your enthusiasm, activism, and support, all of which are critical to our success. I want to thank the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington, especially their president, Mark Levitt, and CEO, Gil Prus, for their partnership and friendship. I want to thank my colleagues, JCRC's exemplary staff, who, while balancing caring for their families and professional obligations, continue to fulfill their responsibilities to our community with determination and excellence. I want to conclude by saying a few words about Israel and our beloved Jewish state as it comes under attack. First, our agency stands in absolute solidarity with Israel. Second, while we mourn the terrible loss of all innocent lives, let there be no doubt that Hamas is responsible for starting this violence. There is no moral equivalence between Israel and Hamas. Israel uses their military to protect their people. Hamas uses their people to protect their weapons and terrorists. I know it can sometimes be exceedingly difficult to be a pro-Israel activist. You may have concerns about some of Israel's policies. The onslaught of anti-Israel and/or anti-Semitic activity on social media can be hard to witness. So is the mainstream media's unrelenting biased coverage, which never contextualizes the conflict and leaves total blame at Israel's doorstep. Clearly, we pro-Israel activists face challenges, but we have the facts on our side. If we are confident, measured, and present our case with truth and vigor, we will absolutely succeed, whether in the halls of Congress or in the battle of public opinion. Let me reassure you that we, the Jewish people, whether American Jews or Israelis, are a resilient and optimistic people. We will weather this crisis and any other challenges we face in the future together, and we will succeed. Now let's get to work. Laila Tov.